New Thinking Aloud is a non-profit endeavor. Your contributions to the New Thinking Aloud Foundation make a meaningful difference in our ability to produce new videos.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today, I'm going to be with my co-host Emmy Vadnais, and we're going to introduce the meditation, which is also being released today, the Tonglen meditation. Emmy, many of you may know, lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and now I'm going to switch over to the internet video. Welcome, Emmy. What a pleasure to be with you.
It's a joy always to be with you, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Well, we'll be talking about the Tonglen meditation that you created, and I suppose I'll give credit where credit is due to begin with. I believe it's a Buddhist meditation, and it was recommended to me by a New Thinking Aloud viewer named Jim Roach, who I met at the Near Death Association meeting last summer in Washington, D.C.
Yes, and this was dovetail with a project that we are exploring as well.
It is, because it was in the context of, in fact, when I met Jim Roach on that occasion, I was talking about an idea that I have expressed previously to the viewers on this channel, that we could begin to work with our viewing audience to develop a focused attention, and at the time my focus was reducing gun violence, and it's probably useful to say right off the bat that the meditation never even mentions gun violence, which I think for today's purposes or our present purposes, that's just fine, because I view this Tonglen meditation as a basic introduction before people get into even more specific approaches. And I understand you were already familiar with this style of meditation.
I am familiar with it, and Tonglen meditation, Tonglen means sending and receiving, or giving and receiving in the Tibetan language, and it's a way for us to help others reduce their suffering. And at the same time, true to its name, when you practice this, not only are you helping others reduce their suffering, you're doing the same within yourself. You are, because initially you're cultivating a sense of loving kindness and compassion, care, attention, and really acceptance of another individual or a group. And the way that I designed this particular meditation is that you do that with yourself first, so that you can get some practice. Because, Jeff, most people in my experience, and I have definitely been in this camp, and it's improved tremendously in the last few years, but most people have a very difficult time being present with themselves without judging themselves or being harsh or critical. And we need some of that, because we want to strive to be better people in most cases. But a lot of times people are feeling shame or guilt from maybe some past unresolved trauma or grief, or a way they view themselves. And so I began this where people can first turn toward themselves with a compassionate heart, and then get a feel for that to then in turn do that with others.
That's so important. I know for a long time, going back to the early in-presence monologues, I have been encouraging people to practice the art of loving themselves unconditionally, which means no matter what anybody else ever said, did, or felt, or thought with regard to you, and no matter how you say, speak, feel, think, or act with regard to yourself.
As you know, we tend to judge others to the level that we can judge ourselves. And so if we're not being kind and loving toward ourselves, we're not going to be kind and loving to others, and hence, thus, the world we live in, which is why you want to embark on this project of decreasing violence toward ourselves and violence toward others, because when we can be more kind to ourselves, we can be more kind to others. And of course, if those listening have done something that you maybe have felt shame about or guilt, if there's something that you need to forgive yourself about or make amends or right a situation in some ways, absolutely listen to that. It doesn't necessarily mean that you always accept everything you did per se, although that can come in time, but to accept your feelings and emotions about yourself in the context of those situations. And then over time, you can be gentler with yourself. And I think that's how we've gotten into this place with negativity, being unkind, and all the way to violence, is because people can feel very separate and alone. And I do think that love and compassion may be the most unifying aspect of our consciousness. And as we practice this, I think most people will discover that they can feel a greater sense of that connection.
And then the meditation goes on after one has established a peaceful inner center, a loving, compassionate sense of oneself. It goes on to incorporate mentally the pain of the world or the pain of another person. And I know for some people, they may not feel ready to do that. For some people, this may be a step too far. And I think I would encourage any viewer who feels that way, that you're not ready to, even in a meditative practice, try to heal the pain that's outside of yourself, then don't. Listen to your intuition and wait until another day.
Right. So in the meditation, it's initially cultivating that sense of loving kindness, then directing it toward yourself, and then selecting, if you wish, someone else, a person, a group, a community, or maybe all beings everywhere, and select whomever you'd like to focus on. And you can send healing energy toward them, or you can bring their suffering into you. And that's why it's good to have done those other phases initially, so that you feel that you are in the state to really transmute that suffering, to allow it to dissipate, so that you're not really bringing it into yourself and that you will stay there. You're being a catalyst for it to transform and into that, moving from suffering to compassion, really.
And that's the key. And it seems to me when enough people begin to engage in such a practice, the world can change.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because when I first started learning energy healing, we were taught to keep your aura separate from other people's auras or energy fields, and to be really careful that you didn't take in any of their, quote, negativity. However, I think that you know this, Jeff, better, or just as much as other people who've been in this field as you have for so many years, that we're all really feeling each other all the time, but we may not fully recognize it. And, it's an interesting question of what's mine and what's somebody else's, really, because we all are interconnected. And so by assisting others, we are helping others, but we're also helping ourselves in the same process.
That's the essence, I think, of the meditation practice.
So, Jeff, you have listened to it with me today. How was it for you listening to that meditation?
Well, frankly, it was wonderful. You did a fabulous job creating the meditation, but the experience of it for me was exactly what I was aiming for in being able to offer it to our viewers. And actually, my feeling is I would like our viewers, those who are interested, to practice it on a regular basis. I consider it a foundational exercise, and I'm pretty sure that the more that people practice this Tonglen meditation, the more they will be able to experience compassion for themselves, unconditional love for themselves, and the more they'll be able to function as a healer of the world.
I love that. Well, I believe you're a healer of the world, Jeff, and I know, having listened to your in presence monologues and the various presentations you've given over time, that you have been practicing this on your own. And I believe you've even mentioned that when you can't sleep at night, sometimes you will naturally slip into this form of meditation.
Well, I didn't know about Tonglen meditation myself until several months ago when Jim Roach suggested it as a possibility for something we would do on the New Thinking Aloud channel. But I've always felt that anybody who's seriously on a spiritual path will discover that natural healing ability is part of the path. If you're on a mystical spiritual journey, healing will sooner or later become part of it. And so I've often done that. As you say, if I'm awake in the middle of the night, I'll think of, well, who can I send healing to now? But the Tonglen meditation is a little different than just sending healing. It's incorporating the pain of a person or the pain of the universe, their suffering, into you, and healing it, transmuting it essentially within yourself, and then sending it back out. And I do think it does require that the person engaging in that practice needs to feel a strong sense of compassion for themselves to begin with. You're not going to be able to send compassion to others until you've understood how you can feel compassion for all the painful places within yourself.
Right, because we tend to judge not only ourselves, but others. And compassion is really the antithesis of that. And unconditional love and unconditional acceptance is the antithesis of judgment. Of course, we need discernment. That it doesn't mean that just anything goes on how people behave or treat themselves or others, but it's being able to move into that place of more understanding of ourselves and understanding of others, that people are behaving in ways or having experiences based on many factors, and to recognize that most people, or maybe everybody, is really doing the best they can. And also, as you know, there's many consciousness studies, experiments that show that we can impact each other, what we perceive as the material or physical world, through our thoughts, our consciousness, and our intentions.
In fact, it was just a few weeks ago, as I recall, that we released your interview with Lynn McTaggart, in which she described a series of many experiments, I think as many as 40, showing that individual and group intention has a measurable impact in the world at large.
Right. And she found that even if it was thousands of people or a small group, whether it was in real time of some type of target, if you will, they were trying to impact, or if it was asynchronous, or if it was local or quote non-local, that the effects were still consistent with how that impacted what the focus was with that intention experiment. And so I think it's very beautiful, Jeff, that you are embarking on creating more of this content for New Thinking Aloud and for people in general, because I think a lot of people feel frustrated and sad with the direction the world is going in, from our environment to the political realms to just your own home environment or community. And people want to make a difference. And sometimes people just get apathetic or frustrated, or even can get more sad or depressed, or start having their own anxiety of feeling like, what's the use? How can I even make a difference? And so what we're embarking on here, I think, is giving people tools and opportunities to make a difference in a positive way, not only for others' lives, but your own life as well, and that you will likely feel better by, embracing this.
One of the things I learned long ago, back when I was a criminology student, is that people who are behaving badly in the world are actually themselves suffering. So by helping to alleviate the suffering of people we might normally in our day-to-day lives not feel much affection for, actually we're helping to make a better world.
Right. And again, we don't have to necessarily agree with all of their actions. Somebody might be listening and thinking, you mean I'm supposed to feel compassion for a murderer? Or I'm supposed to feel compassion for a rapist? And you yourself, who have worked with individuals who have engaged in those behaviors, you have said that they're humans just like the rest of us. And, well, you can speak for what your thoughts are on that.
Well, first of all, we're all interconnected. That's what quantum entanglement suggests, that every particle that was once interacting with another particle remains interconnected with it. And every particle was interconnected at the time of the Big Bang. So we're all interconnected with everything. And that means the idea of separation is something of an illusion, a very powerful illusion, but it's been known for a long time by mystics. For example, John Donne, the Renaissance poet, famously wrote, when you hear the bell tolling, don't ask for whom it tolls for you.
Meaning that...
Well, when the bell tolls for a funeral, every time another person suffers at some deep, deep level of our own psyche, it's also suffering as a result. And it's a funny thing for me to say, because I think of myself as just about the happiest person I know. But nevertheless, we are all subject to the pain of the world. Right.
And the more that we can heal that suffering, the pain, and support each other, the more that we may have less of those dark places in our own, I suppose you could say, collective consciousness.
Ultimately, the reason that we're releasing the Tonglen meditation video, which will be released today, and that we're talking about it now, is because I hope that from our large viewing audience, over 155,000 subscribers at this point, we will develop a core of people who are ready, willing, and able to engage in this practice with the intention of helping on many, many levels, but eventually we'll be looking at gun violence specifically to heal the world.
Beautiful. I am so grateful to embark on this journey with you, Jeff, and everybody who will be partaking with these beautiful efforts.
Emmy, thank you so much for working with me to create the video and for all the many, many things you do for the New Thinking Aloud channel. You are an indispensable part of what we do.
My pleasure, Jeff, and I am so grateful to be aligned with you, and thank you for bringing out the best in me as well.
And for those of you who are listening or viewing this conversation, thank you for being with us, because you are the reason that we are here. I imagine that by now, many of you already realize that in conjunction with White Crow Books, we've just launched the New Thinking Aloud Dialogues book imprint, and our first title is There Life After Death? New Thinking Aloud is a non-profit endeavor. Your contributions to the New Thinking Aloud Foundation make a meaningful difference in our ability to produce new videos.